Hi, Gately Stevenson Matthews. I'm honored to be a member of the Board of Trustees here at the North Shore Historical Museum. And on behalf of myself, on behalf of the president of the board membership, the director, and all of us here at the museum, welcome to the 8th episode of Pop-Up Visit. As you see, we are coming to you live from the North Shore Historical Museum, and we have got a special treat for you today, and that is we have got Brian Mercadante. Brian is not only someone who has been a member of the trustees here at the museum for a long time, but has been so very involved in the community. So I know you're going to enjoy that interview that Amy will be having with Brian. As always, we will wrap up the episode with a message from the board's president, Georgie Cannett. And so, on your mark, get set. Amy, take it away.
Hello. As you know, we are a former active courthouse, and I am up here on the judge's bench. With me in the witness box is one of our founding board members, Brian Mercadante, who I'm going to cross-examine. Thanks so much for joining us, Brian, and welcome.
Glad to be here, Amy. Thanks for inviting me.
All right. My first question to you is, how did you become involved with the museum?
Well, I've always been interested in history, and I would talk to my family about how did I get here, what happened before I came here. And my mother actually came through Ellis Island with her father and two sisters in the early 1900s, and settled in Oyster Bay on the Cove Estate, which is now Planting Fields. So she grew up on the Cove Estate. And my grandfather worked for Mr. Cove. My mother graduated Oyster Bay High School and then worked for the Jacobson Shipyard in Oyster Bay. And my father was born here. Of course, he was born in the house on East Avenue in Glen Cove, and they used to have midwives. They didn't have hospital at that time. So he was born in the house. His father had come around the 1900s, turn of the century, with his brother to work here on Long Island. When I talked to my dad about the family, he told me that, you know, we had a coat of arms, and that there was an opera house in Naples named the Mercadante Opera House, and there's a road in Rome named Via Mercadante, a big avenue, and one of our ancestors did operas and worked did a lot of things for the Catholic Church. And my uncle, all the brothers went to the war, in World War II. And when my uncle came home from the war, he was elected first Italian-American mayor of Glen Cove in 1947. So he was partners actually with Joseph Swazi. They were law partners. So my uncle ran, and he became the mayor of Glen Cove. He was elected. And in the second term, he convinced Judge Swazi, who was just a lawyer at the time, to run for judge. And Judge Swazi was elected to one of the youngest judges ever in New York State. So the two of them were in government, and they did a lot of things together around Glen Cove, and they changed the community. And my uncle was in charge of Luxembourg area after the war for a short time as military governor. So he was trying to find ways to get food and get transportation and get things going back there again. So he was pretty familiar with how to get the economy rolling again. So later, I opened a business here in Glen Cove, and you might remember Accent on the Home. And I was working with the Business Improvement District. I was the first treasurer, and then I was vice president. And when I was vice president, Tom Swazi was mayor. And Tom and I talked about the building here, that it could be available. And I said, I'd like to pursue that idea for a museum for Glen Cove. And I asked the bid board of directors for $1,000 to do the paperwork for the museum. So I made the motion, the board approved it, we got $1,000, and the executive director at that time, a few people from the CDA and myself, we went over to Oyster Bay to talk to the Oyster Bay Historical Society about how they got their charter, and they helped us, and we applied to the state, and we got our 501c3, and we were pretty much off and running. We needed 5 board members to step forward and become the first board, and they did. And they were from Carol Nelson from Bayville, Susan Challenger lived in Huntington, Amy was from Glen Head. I lived in Glen Head at the time. Bert Singer was from Glen Cove. And we asked John McKay, who was the head of the library, to join us. So we had a historical background in there. And John let us use the history room at the library for our meetings when we first started meeting and working on how to raise money to start the museum, get the museum going.
You have an amazing local history, and I know that this restoration was a labor of love. Can you tell us a specific part of the restoration that still sticks with you today?
The hardest part was doing the legal work, because as we raised money to open or get a building, we didn't even have the building. It took us like 10 years to actually go through the court system and raise the money to pay for the building, which was all of $10, by the way. So, and in the end, it was $10. But when Vincent Toronto, who was our pro bono attorney, he never charged us anything over this whole 10-year period to go through the back and forth, with the owners of the building. And when we went into City Hall to the planning board to get a subdivision, there was a moratorium on subdivisions, so we couldn't do the subdivision. But they did make an exception for us, and he came into the courtroom with actually a luggage cart to bring in all the files to explain to the planning board, what a hard time we had and what a good group we were, and we worked so hard together over the years to save the money, and we deserve to be given the opportunity to take on this project. So in the end, we got the building for $10, and then we started. Of course, selecting an architect was one of the early things that we did, and we chose James O'Grady, a local architect, which was very helpful to us. And we applied for grants to help get us going. The first grant we got was given to us by Governor Pataki's administration, and it was for $105,000. And we had this building, and you could see from the 3rd floor to the basement because it was in terrible condition. And we had to rebuild the roof first, just because we wanted to stop the leaking and secure the building. It was a home for pigeons, and that's about it at that time. So the first thing we did was the roof. Of course, that didn't allow us to come into the building and use it as a museum, but we had to raise $105,000 as a match. And the way the grants work, we actually had to do $210,000 worth of work to get $105,000 back. So that was quite a challenge, and that was our first grant, but we made it through.
And I know that the building itself presented a lot of challenges. It's an old building, and you did a meticulous restoration there. You can't really tell which is the old side and which is the new side, but I know some things you were able to recreate. So can you tell us about what's here behind the judge's bench, right up here, these leather panels?
Sure. This it's one of the details that the contractor couldn't deal with because he had no experience in upholstery. So, having been in the upholstery business for 45 years, I knew my way around. So, this was all destroyed. It was all torn apart, and the stuffing was hanging out. And what we figured out was we would take it apart, and then we would know what we needed to put it back together. So we went in, we took all the nail heads out, and this is called a pyramid tack in here. And if you notice, this is overlapping and then nailed back on. So what we did was we ordered hides. Now, you know, most fabrics come in rolls or yards. Hides come in the size of the cow, you know. So we ordered 1, 2, 3 hides, and then we picked them out to match as close as possible to the way the old leather was, and we padded it on the inside, and we recreated the detail. I think it's one of the great things about the inside of the building.
Absolutely. I mean, again, as I said, it's a meticulous restoration with the woodwork, the upholstery, the attention to details throughout. We very much look forward to reopening, hopefully the beginning of August. And Brian, for your closing statement, since we're still up here in the legal part, what would you like to tell people about the museum that they may not know?
Well, the most important thing about the museum is that it needs funding, and it's never-ending funding. I mean, from the early days, I lent the museum $2,500 because we had no base money to come up with any way to raise money. So I lent the museum $2,500 and we went and got T-shirts. And so if you bought a membership in the museum, I think at that time it was about $10, you got a free T-shirt. And we went to all the fairs and street fairs and everywhere we could to get the membership up. So the membership is very important to us because from the membership is our greatest source of funds and participation in all the events that we have here. And the events are wonderful. The museum was designed to be a living museum in terms of having the ability to change. You know, we didn't want to be the 1725 to the 1750 museum. We wanted to be a museum that could rotate exhibits, have lectures from all different time periods. So, you know, you could find a myriad of things to do. And we didn't want to be stuck only in Glen Cove. So that's why we made it the North Shore Historical Museum. Because as a business owner in Glen Cove, I knew that you can't just have people coming from one area. It had to be much broader, and the participation had to be much wider. And in order to do that, we called it the North Shore Historical Museum, and we then opened our scope for the North Shore of Long Island, which gave us a lot more to talk about. And we didn't lock into any specific period, so you can come as a member and enjoy a lecture. The Girl Scouts come all the time to do mock trials, and it's so amazing to see the young people enjoying the building, especially the jail cell downstairs. So funding is the key thing. So through our membership, become a member. You know, it's a good way to start. You can come and see the museum, visit us, see a lecture, and we need your help. And we always need your help, not only during COVID, but we need your support before COVID, after COVID. So please become a member of the museum. Come see it, visit us, enjoy our programs, and help this great government building stay alive and be part of the community.
All contributions are tax deductible. You can find information on how to donate on our website, and you can also use PayPal. Thanks for listening and stay safe.